There is a quiet moment of realization that visits nearly every person with a sharp, perceptive mind, yet it's a moment that almost never gets spoken of. It doesn't happen on a stage or after a victory. It arrives in the stillness, maybe while staring out a window or lying awake at night, when you suddenly understand that the very quality others admire is the same one that has gently set you apart. You perceive the world through a different filter. You absorb information faster than you can process the feeling behind it. And initially, this seems like a superpower, a secret key to seeing the world with more definition. But as time passes, you start to detect a weight, a subtle burden that nobody prepared you for. The more your mind sharpens, the more solitude seems to find you, because a quick intellect isn't just about finding solutions. It's about perceiving the entire field, the underlying structures, the unspoken motives, the paradoxes that most people never pause to notice. And when your thoughts outpace the present moment, it carves out a silent gap between you and everything else, not from a desire for separation, but because your consciousness is already 3 moves ahead, forecasting outcomes, deconstructing meanings that others don't stop to consider. It's like being at a vibrant party while your awareness is in the hallway, hearing, processing, and interpreting, but never quite joining in. If you've always been described as bright, perceptive, or wise beyond your years, you likely recognize this sensation, and maybe you've struggled to articulate it, because society applauds intelligence so fervently that admitting there's a downside can feel like a betrayal. But a downside exists, a silent tax, and it manifests in ways you can feel profoundly, even without the words. Perhaps it's the internal pressure to instantly comprehend any new concept, or the assumption that you'll always choose correctly because you should know better, or that faint irritation when you explain an idea with clarity, only to be met with blank stares. Or maybe it's the peculiar blend of deep empathy and personal detachment, where you can dissect someone else's emotions while struggling to articulate your own. You begin to question, if intelligence is such an advantage, why does it often make simple things feel so complex? People may have celebrated you for your correct answers in youth, but no one taught you how to cope when those answers begin to multiply into endless questions. No one prepared you for the sensation of your own awareness creating a barrier between you and the world you inhabit. While people appreciate the results of a sharp mind, the innovation, the vision, the insight, they frequently miss the internal reality of possessing one. The truth is, people with agile minds often bear invisible loads, like the load of constant analysis, not by choice, but because your brain doesn't have an off switch. The world floods in, unfiltered. Every minor detail, every slight change in intonation, every implied message, your mind gathers them all instinctively, like a sponge soaking up water. And before long, you're working through data that most people filter out. You detect the pause before a person speaks. You sense discomfort hidden behind a grin. You unconsciously map patterns in behavior. And sometimes you wish you couldn't, because once a pattern is seen, it cannot be unseen. Once you know, you can't return to not knowing. Intelligence doesn't just hone your logic, it hones your sensitivity. Even in moments where blissful ignorance would be a relief, then there's the load of being misinterpreted. You articulate a concept and are told you're overcomplicating it. You express an insight and are met with confusion. You try to distill it further and it still sounds like it's coming from a place they cut and access. After a while, you learn to hold back parts of yourself just to fit in, not because you want to dull your intellect, but but because the constant effort of decelerating your thoughts to match the surrounding tempo is utterly draining. You become an unwilling translator of your own inner world, a skill you never asked to learn. But here's something rarely acknowledged. The more intelligent you are, the more prone you are to a state known as cognitive solitude. It's not about being lonely or unsocial, it's the sensation of living from the inside, observing the world operate at a pace that doesn't sync with your internal rhythm. It's the quiet knowing that your focus is always elsewhere, processing in layers instead of steps, interrogating even the most basic assumptions, experiencing profound feelings even in total silence. It's the sense of being perpetually out of sync with your environment. Most quick-minded people don't grapple with comprehension. They grapple with fitting in. They grapple with releasing the need to scrutinize every emotion. They grapple with the weight of always having to be the reliable one. They grapple with the anxiety that showing doubt or confusion will shatter the image others have constructed of them. And they grapple with the quiet reality that intelligence doesn't simplify existence. It simply makes it more transparent, and transparency can be painfully revealing. Clarity doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it brings a heavier truth, because when you view the world with excessive transparency, with all its conflicts, imperfections, and irregularities, it becomes difficult to live on the superficial level. You're always diving deeper, pondering deeper, experiencing deeper. You become the person others seek for guidance, but rarely the person who feels thoroughly known. And sometimes, the very thing that makes you brilliant is the same thing that keeps you staring at the ceiling in the dark. But there's another layer. Intelligence also brings emotional nuances that are seldom discussed, like the challenge of quieting your internal monologue. The way your thoughts can spiral, not due to a problem, but because your mind is perpetually searching for significance, or how you often review interactions in your head, examining your words, their intent, the alternate interpretations. Sometimes you aren't anxious. You're simply engaging with a depth that others mistake for distress. There's also the unspoken pressure of potential. When people say you're capable, gifted, special, those words don't just land as compliments. They transform into obligations, paths you're expected to take, benchmarks you're supposed to uphold. And when you stumble, even a little, you feel the impact of that shortfall more acutely than anyone. Because highly intelligent people don't necessarily fear failure itself. They fear failing to become the person they envisioned. This leads to a self-enforced ideal, a rigorous internal benchmark that makes minor errors seem catastrophic. When you grasp concepts rapidly, people presume you'll grasp all things rapidly. When you excel at one thing, people assume you'll excel at everything. And suddenly, intelligence shifts from an attribute to a duty. But of all these hidden taxes, the most poignant might be how intelligence molds your emotional landscape. Not by making you cold, but often the reverse. Many with sharp minds feel things intensely. They just manifest it differently. They conceptualize pain. They systematize fear. They dissect emotions that would be easier to just experience. And it's not for a lack of feeling. It's because they feel so much that expressing it becomes complex. Intelligence grants you the capacity to decipher your feelings, but not always the capacity to coexist with them peacefully. You understand why you feel a certain way long before you know how to manage it. You can articulate your sorrow before you can ease it. You can define your isolation before you can remedy it. And so you inhabit a mind that experiences everything with precision, yet processes it all in isolation. It creates a peculiar duality. The smarter you are, the more difficult it becomes to seek support. Because you've been the solver, the anchor, the one with the plan, and even when you need a shoulder, a voice inside whispers, "You ought to manage this yourself." But intellect doesn't erase human needs. It doesn't eliminate yearning. It doesn't make you invulnerable to doubt, grief, or fear. It simply provides a more elaborate vocabulary to define them. And sometimes, more words make the emotions more intricate, not less. There's also a quiet yearning that intelligent people hardly ever confess. The longing for someone who gets you without requiring a simplified version. Someone who can track your thoughts without getting lost. Someone who hears not just the statements, but the substance underneath. Someone who feels like a sanctuary for your consciousness, not just your affections. You don't need a genius. You just need someone courageous enough to dive into your depths instead of retreating from them. But for many, that sort of bond feels elusive. And when something feels elusive, you start to wonder if it's even real. Yet, despite all this, in spite of the isolation, the pressure, the emotional intricacy, there is something deeply human about the journey of a bright mind. Because beneath every rapid connection, every insight, every observation, every silent cycle of analysis, there's a person doing their best to navigate a reality not built for profundity. You are not excessive. Your mind is not a curse. Your thoughts are not a nuisance. They are merely the output of a brain that is fully awake in a way that can sometimes be overpowering. A brain that perceives the world with both sharpness and tenderness simultaneously. A brain that has spent a lifetime trying to reconcile understanding with community. And if no one has ever told you this clearly, please hear it. There is nothing broken about you. What you're navigating is the natural outcome of an intricate mind existing in an often simple world. And there is more to this narrative, so much more. Because the hidden cost of a sharp intellect isn't solely about external perceptions. It's also about the view you hold of yourself. There arrives a point when every perceptive individual recognizes that their biggest misjudgment wasn't about the world, but about their own nature. For years you may have believed that intelligence should render everything more understandable, more straightforward. But the actuality is that the more you know, the more you become conscious of how much remains unknown. Intelligence doesn't shrink the universe, it magnifies it. And sometimes, that magnification feels like standing before an endless ocean, unsure which way to swim. You start to see potential in every direction. Every route splits into 100 others. Every choice unveils a cascade of new inquiries. Every fresh concept leads to strata you never anticipated. And while this inquisitiveness is part of what makes your mind incredible, it can also become a quiet source of paralysis. You feel not the dread of a wrong choice, but the dread of making any choice. Because when you can envision so many potential realities, the here and now feels too confined to hold them. This creates a unique form of stagnation that many bright people face. Not from a lack of direction, but from an overabundance of it. Not from a lack of vision, but from seeing too many paths. You don't struggle with purpose because you're aimless. You struggle because you comprehend too much. You perceive the consequence of every option. You sense the gravity of every possibility. And sometimes you remain motionless simply because your consciousness is saturated with alternatives. And then there's the subtle weight of being the one who gets it. Throughout your life, you've likely been the individual who decoded things quicker than those around you. Mentors applauded it. Companions leaned on it. Family anticipated it. And gradually, that role becomes part of your identity. You start to feel that your value is linked to your solutions, not your inquiries. to your resilience, not your vulnerability, to your certainty, not your ambiguity. So when you inevitably encounter situations where you are lost, situations every human faces, your mind turns inward, not with kindness, but with judgment. You think, I am supposed to be able to solve this, even when the challenge isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a human experience to be felt. Even when the resolution lies not in reason, but in allowing yourself to be imperfect. Highly intelligent people often have the hardest time when life demands emotional presence over analytical prowess. When understanding emerges not from thought, but from openness. When the answer is not a revelation, but a relationship. And because you've constructed an identity around competence, you sometimes refuse yourself the grace of being cared for. Yet, one of the most vital lessons you can ever integrate is this. Intelligence does not substitute for humanity. It does not remove the necessity for comfort, patience, reassurance, or kinship. It does not grant you an exemption from the complexities of the heart. In fact, the heart may be the one domain where intelligence finally encounters its limit, because emotions don't follow rules. They don't yield to scrutiny. They don't progress in an orderly fashion like an equation you can resolve. They twist, they surge, they conflict. And for someone with a deeply systematic mind, that unpredictability can be deeply unsettling. Not because you lack emotion, but because you experience them so powerfully and attempt to codify them too soon. Sometimes the most brilliant people face challenges in relationships, not from a lack of love, but from loving so deeply that they overanalyze every aspect. They doubt their own worth. They re-examine moments, searching for the subtext in every syllable, every silence, every look. They scrutinize what they feel instead of surrendering to it. And this can create a chasm, not from a lack of feeling, but from a fear of overwhelming others with the magnitude of what they experience. Your mind is not a burden. It is a lantern in a dim world. There's also the silent trial of connecting with others when your consciousness naturally seeks substance. You crave exchanges that delve into concepts, sentiments, histories, purpose. You want communication that feels vibrant, textured, significant. But daily life often runs on autopilot. Pleasantries, simplicity, repetition. And while there is comfort in simplicity, it can sometimes feel like you're a symphony playing in a world of jingles. You don't desire to be difficult. You don't desire to be overwhelming. You just want to be met without having to conceal your inner universe. But because such encounters are infrequent, you might learn to keep dimensions of yourself reserved, unveiling them only to those who feel safe enough to receive them. And perhaps the most profound cost of a sharp intellect is the standard you impose on yourself. Not the one others set for you, but the one you hold quietly within. The standard to always be poised, to always have a strategy, to always keep perspective, to always know how to steer your life with accuracy. But intelligence doesn't shield you from human uncertainty. It doesn't shield you from loss, regret, error, or anxiety. It only gives you a richer lexicon to articulate them. And sometimes that lexicon makes the experience more acute, not less. There are instances when your intellect becomes a dual-sided blade. You understand too well the dangers. You comprehend too thoroughly what could fail. You foresee conclusions before the story has a chance to unfold. You console others with insights you rarely grant yourself, because your mind critiques your own heart more severely than any critic ever could. And still, underneath all this complexity, there is something remarkably beautiful about possessing a mind that refuses to accept the shallow, because while intelligence carries a price, it also brings a quiet, extraordinary depth that defines how you engage with life. You detect beauty in details others ignore. The subtle textures in a dialogue, the silent truths behind a person's eyes, the way a single instant can alter someone's entire trajectory. You find meaning in sequences, narratives in glances, lessons in stumbles. You feel existence, not as a sequence of incidents, but as a web of interconnections. You hold compassion, not in drops, but in vast seas, and this depth, while occasionally overwhelming, also grants you access to a form of wisdom that can transform not only your own path, but the paths of those you touch. People with bright minds often become the quiet witnesses, the profound reflectors, the ones who sense the world deeply and translate that sensation into comprehension. And yet, many of them carry a quiet dread. The dread that their awareness sets them too far apart. The dread that they are fated to journey through life somewhat alone. The dread that depth is a divider instead of a connector. But this dread is usually a distortion. The world needs individuals who reason as you do. People who challenge, who envision, who grasp the intricacies others ignore. The world needs intellects that hold both acuity and kindness, both rationality and passion, both perception and empathy. The true task is not to become less intelligent. It is to become more compassionate toward yourself, to permit your intelligence to be an instrument for connection, not a cause for isolation, to let your depth be an invitation to others, not a reason to retreat. Because here is the core truth. Intelligence is not meant to divide. It's meant to enlighten. It's meant to help you perceive the world more accurately so you can live within it more completely. It's meant to help you know yourself so you can walk your path with more intention. It's meant to help you navigate your feelings, not escape from them. But there is one final hidden cost that is almost never voiced. The cost of being highly conscious in a society that often chooses simplicity. When your mind naturally detects systems and consequences, you become attuned to things others overlook. You notice misalignments, emotional undercurrents, unspoken stresses. And while this perception is a gift, it can also be exhausting when the world expects you to accept things without question. There will be periods when your comprehension makes you feel ancient, periods when you feel you've lived several emotional lifetimes in a single week, periods when your empathy seems too vast for your body, periods when your internal world seems too loud for the external quiet. But none of this means you are flawed or disconnected. It means your mind is fully engaged. It means your heart is deeply invested. It means you are not sleepwalking through your days. You are completely present, even in the experiences that test you. And perhaps the most restorative truth you can accept is that intelligence does not demand flawlessness. It does not demand absolute certainty. It does not demand total command. Sometimes the most powerful act a luminous mind can perform is to release. Release the pressure. Release the standards. Release the notion that you must always be leading. Because the genuine gift of intelligence isn't thinking quicker than everyone else. It's seeing beyond the immediate. It's discerning significance where others see habit. It's comprehending emotions with a lucidity that helps you evolve, not just examine. You don't have to bear the entire world simply because you perceive it more distinctly. You don't have to fix every issue simply because you spot them earlier. You don't have to mask your profundity simply because it's uncommon. You are permitted to pause. You are permitted to be unsure. You are permitted to be human in the spaces where your intellect has made you feel accountable. In moments of questioning, remember this: the consciousness you possess is not an anchor. It is a light. It illuminates things others might pass by. It reveals paths others don't contemplate. It uncovers truths that help you walk your journey with greater consciousness. And while that light can sometimes make reality feel more intense, it also lets you witness splendor with a level of richness that is a rare privilege. The hidden cost of a sharp mind is genuine, but so is the hidden splendor. The splendor of maturing, not just in knowledge, but in understanding. You are not alone in these experiences, and you are not destined to traverse life feeling detached. The world is filled with people who think profoundly, who feel powerfully, who question their role, who search for meaning. You might not always find them, but they are there. And when you do connect, whether in deep friendships, partnerships, or even brief, passing exchanges, you will understand that intelligence doesn't isolate permanently. It draws toward it the kinds of spirits that harmonize with yours, however quietly. And when that occurs, something remarkable happens. You start to see that your intellect was never the source of separation. It was the guide leading you toward the souls that would finally feel like your true place. Because the ultimate reality is this: the price of high intelligence is real, but the return is equally authentic. And that return is the capacity to live a life rich with depth, purpose, wonder, relationship, and a profound understanding of what it means to be alive. Your mind is not a weight. It is an offering, a unique one, a magnificent one that arrives with complexity, but also with immense beauty. And as you continue, the greatest change will arrive not from trying to alter your mind, but from learning to believe in it too. Welcome its unique processes, to respect its way of feeling, to allow it to be both methodical and heartfelt, both reasoned and sensitive, both organized and untamed. Because, in the end, intelligence is not about being superior to others, it's about being authentic to yourself. And once you internalize that, the hidden cost begins to feel less like a weight and more like a journey toward a more meaningful life, a journey toward a more integrated self, a journey toward a reality where your mind is not something you carry in solitude, but something you offer gently, honestly, and bravely to the people who value it most. If this exploration of the deep mind resonated with you, please support our community by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought for more journeys into understanding ourselves.